Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Chair and Vice Chair of Harlow Council.
Good evening, councillors. Can you see me? Apologies for absence.
Chair, turn your mic on.
Thank you. Where's Councillor Williams?
Two apologies from us, Councillor Alistair Gunn and Councillor Colleen Ross.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. The Labour Group has apologies for Councillor Dunn, Councillor Davis and Councillor Harvey.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Item 3, minutes of the previous council meeting held on the 15th of July. Are they agreed? Agreed. Right. Now for my turn. Right, it's been a quite busy time since the last meeting. I went to the Queen's Award for Voluntary Services at Down Hall, where PAH Patients Panel won the Volunteers Award. I then met the vaccination bus. I've been to Brentwood Civic Service, Rochford Garden Party, Bishop Stortford Musical Picnic, Mayor of Broxbourne Afternoon Tea, VJ Day, the Beer Festival at the Gibber Gardens, where I'd like to thank Councillor Danvers for his hospitality and showing me around the gardens. And if you haven't been, it's well worth a visit. I also went to the Community Embrace Around the World Food. We then had my golf day, which was a very good day. We had 60 players playing in it. Public health which actually won the competition, and 3 of our councillors came second. Also went to the inauguration of the new Bishop of Chelmsford. Also attended the Great Britain Spring Clean. I also opened up the same day the Five Ways Pizza Shop, and also was at the opening of the new sculpture at St Mary's Little Pond. I've then attended the High Sheriff's Garden Party and the Salfordworth Civic Service. Coming up is my civic service on the 7th of November. We also have a Red Church Brewery Tour, which is on the 13th at 2:30 or on the 20th at 6:30. Tickets are going very, very well. If you want to book, please get in contact with Lisa. Mr. Holt.
Yes. Sorry, I've only just seen the answer, so I've got to think of it. Right. The original scheme I thought wasn't properly thought out, because every day there are numerous breaches of this.
Is that still your question? What is your supplementary question regarding the answer that you got?
Well, it says that it can't be amended, got to go through various other orders and that.
What is your question? What is your question, Mr. Holt?
My question is, as you've got to wait to put begging in, and there's a total ignorance of the order, wouldn't it be cheaper to do away with the order totally? Because yet again, there's a total waste of council taxpayers' money, because the order is not enforced.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I switched off.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. And thank you for your question and your supplementary. I think I share your concern about public space protection orders and their viability. I think we had a good debate in this chamber about that back in 2019. The fact remains, Mr. Hope, that this will remain legally enforced until August 2022. to make any changes or to renew at the end of that or not renew will still require the council to continue to gather the evidence of effectiveness at the moment. So I think at the moment the public space protection order will remain in place until August 2022, and as we gather more evidence over the coming months, we will then be able to make a future determination about the future of PSPOs or not.
Mr. Howard, you've got a second question. Do you want to read this out, or
No, thank you, afraid.
have you got a supplementary?
No.
Thank you.
Questions for councillors, we have 4.
Councillor Clark. Is she here? Sorry, Jim.
Pets Corner took huge steps to remain a sustainable, popular service. What are the new administration's expectations regarding the future of Pets Corner? Are there plans to generate more income? If so, what exactly are they?
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Pets Corner is a much-loved council asset that makes an important contribution to the health and well-being of our community. Our administration is exploring options to invest in the council's much-valued statutory services, which includes Pets Corner in the wider portfolio. There are no plans to make changes to the council's community services budgets that will negatively impact frontline delivery. Work continues by our administration on delivering an updated medium-term financial strategy and budget for the next municipal year that focuses on extending opportunity and prosperity, the guiding focus that flows through everything the council will aim to achieve in the future. The council's community services will play a key role in promoting inclusion to help realise the goal of extending opportunity. To practically achieve this on the ground, our administration is exploring opportunities for additional income generation at Pets Corner, which includes looking at further educational opportunities and scoping the potential to expand the use of the Learning Centre as a more established conference facility.
Councillor Clark, have you got a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think we agree very much on the importance of Pets Corner, and I'm pleased that there are no plans to make changes that will negatively impact it. There is a fine line between commercialisation and simple income generation. Can you make a commitment that you won't be introducing entry charges to Pets Corner?
Councillor Charles.
Chair, this administration, let me be crystal clear with the Labour administration, will not be introducing charges at Pets Corner. Only this week, Councillor Clark, did we announce additional investment in Pets Corner, new cladding, larger stable windows for viewing access for young people, particularly families that visit that centre. I myself and colleagues in this room have visited Pets Corner and recognise the value of a free opportunity for families that may be struggling, that are able to go to that petting zoo, and the excellent work that it does. And fundamental to our support is making sure those families are able to access it in the future. This council is serious about investing in its community facilities for the benefit of residents, and is focused not only on the residents but the welfare of the animals at Pets Corner. So I take great issue, Councillor Clark, with your suggestion, because it hasn't entered my thought process whatsoever.
Councillor Davis.
Sorry, could you repeat that last sentence? I didn't hear it. What did you take exception to?
I take exception, Councillor Clark, that you would suggest this administration would charge families, vulnerable families, to enter Pets Corner, because that thought process has never entered my mind whatsoever.
Councillor Davis.
Do all the sitting Harlow District Councillors live in Harlow?
Councillor Perry.
All Conservative
councillors live in Harlow. As for the local ones, I can't comment.
Have you a supplementary question, Councillor Davis?
In that case, Chair, would the portfolio holder ask the Conservative councillors to make it clear in their declaration of interest that they do live in Harlow? That is unless, of course, there are no fixed abode.
Your second question, Councillor Davis?
How was it, Chair?
Oh, sorry. Councillor Payne.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it was every councillor's right not to declare that if they wish not to. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can we ask the new officer?
The discretion has been given to the civic officers as their address on the form on the internet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Davis, your second question?
Take that as read, Chair, and I would thank Simon for his reply.
Have you got a supplementary question? Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Sorry, I'm going to start this because I'm hoping that we can send a recording of this to the family, and I'm sure that Andrew will share with me. Before I ask the question, can I also, and I'm sure Andrew will share with me, our recognition and thanks to Michael Casey for bringing this issue to the attention of the wider community over the dreadful issues. But my question was, last week was the 20th anniversary of 9/11, where 2,977 people were murdered. Your Harlow reminded us all of a local lad born and educated in Harlow who was a victim of that tragedy, Simon Madison. Whilst he moved to America, he should be remembered by Harlow in some way. I ask the Council at the next opportunity that we find a naming opportunity to recognise Simon's life and his ambitions.
Yeah. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I thought Councillor Durkin had a further part of his
Yes, I thought he
question,
did.
which I think, reading into the record, is could we send a message to his family in America and at a suitable time, enabling us to be aware that Harlow never forgets its own, which I think is important to put on record, as you say, Councillor Durkin. So my answer, yes, 9/11 remains one of the most poignant and tragic events in our lifetime. And on the 20th anniversary at the weekend was a powerful reminder to reflect on those who lost their lives, including Simon. I was moved by the tribute to Simon in your Harlow, and I'm also aware that there was a BBC Essex carried an interview with Simon's family in America where they spoke about his life in Harlow and his family home at Paddock Mead, incidentally in the ward that I first represented on the council, so well familiar with it. We should be guided, of course, by the wishes of Simon's family, and I'm asking officers to gather contact details for his family so that we can ask them what they feel would be an appropriate memorial to Simon.
Have you got supplementary?
Yes, I do apologise actually. There was another one on the page, so that was my mistake. Yes, Andrew, I completely agree with everything that you said. Well, would you agree with me that something fitting may well be the new buildings at the Lister House area, because that is quite close to where Simon was brought up. But also equally, I hope we can also look to see whether or not there is somewhere, like somewhere in the town park, that we can actually have an area where we can go, we can enjoy, and we can remember Simon as a good friend and a good comrade of Harlow. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
I think, Councillor Durkin, there are a number of places around the town where memorials could be. I'm told Simon attended Abertwell School as I did, primary school. So I think there are lots of places around the town that could be appropriate. I don't want to specify something until we've had a chance to speak with his family and see A, if they're happy, and B, what they feel is appropriate. But I'm happy to invite Councillor Durkin to join me in a discussion with that once we have details from the family.
I'd to make a question from councillors. Councillor Payne, you are voting this. Councillor Hardware, you are seconding this.
Okay, I'm seconding the
And
second
you
right
can
to speak
speak
up.
up. Thank you. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm glad to be moving this long-awaited motion. The aim of this motion is to set at ease residents' concerns over what could be perceived as rampant and uncontrollable development around the borders of our town. But before I get into the motion itself, I want to be utterly clear that this administration is not against building new homes. Building new homes are vital. There is a housing shortage in this country, and it's important for anybody wanting to get onto the housing ladder, be it they want to own their own home or they prefer to rent their own home. There needs to be the housing there for them, and we recognise the shortage. And that's why this group has always proposed development to the north of Harlow. And much as I would rather it didn't have to be that way personally, that seems the most sensible place to put it, because it has the infrastructure there and it has the space to be able to accommodate the level of housing that we need. But let me be clear, in building homes we shouldn't forget the residents that already live there, and there shouldn't be a race to the bottom. It shouldn't be just a numbers game of getting houses up. And the problem with allowing development to the south and west, indeed to the east of Harlow, is that it has the very likely impact of reducing the amenity of where our current residents live, because we do not have the infrastructure, and we will not have the infrastructure there to be able to cope with such vast amounts of development that's being proposed to be passed. And what I'm going to do something which I'm actually going to read the motion out loud, because I think the motion itself covers many of the sentiments that we have here, and I think it's very important to make this very, very clear. That this council recognises the huge concerns many residents have about the proposed development around Harlow, including Summers West, Catherine's East, Latin Priory into the east of Harlow. There are worries that these developments will overwhelm the existing town infrastructure, services and amenities. In particular, these concerns surround transport links in the west and south of Harlow, as I've already mentioned, and the lack of capacity on Southern Way, Water Lane, Broadley Road and the B181 Epping Road, and the potential impact on local medical and educational services. The proposed strategic housing site to the east of Harlow and those developments already taking place on the Gilden Way in the new junction, M11 junction, will add additional impact on the residents of Old Harlow, who rightly continue to raise objections about the proposals for further new housing. And that's why this group has always been very keen that those residents and every other resident in the town was properly consulted. And they were never consulted on where new housing sites were going, merely about the process of developing the local plan. So, in support of everything I've said so far, our motion reads as such that we remain against growth to the southern and western boundaries of the town, preferring any growth to be the north, Gilston Villages and east of Harlow. Will make any representations necessary to communicate that it does not support any development of Summers West or any other developments to the south or west of Harlow. We will not sell or lease any rights or lands or rights of way which we possess that may assist in the development of Summers West or any other developments to the south and west of Harlow. We will put in place a plan to do everything possible to mitigate the strategic housing site to the east of Harlow, a housing site that if we'd been in administration we would not have allowed to have happened. To better recognise the potential impact on existing residents, particularly in Churchgate Street and neighbouring parts of Old Harlow, that will also be affected by conducting an additional strategic assessment of the proposed housing site to gain further clarity about its feasibility and publish a specific mitigation action plan to limit the severity of the impact on such potential housing work. Develop a separate agreement between this council and Old Harlow residents to safeguard the community from future overdevelopment, recognising the importance of preserving the conservation area and committing to additional consultation in line with the new community engagement strategy that will be developed by this council, so that Old Harlow residents' concerns can be used to inform future plans to mitigate prospects of an East strategic housing site. Furthermore, the Chief Executive, in consultation with the portfolio holder for strategic growth, submits a formal objection to Epping Forest District Council local development plan to the extent that it impacts upon points once of 4 that I have previously raised in this motion. I'd like to finish by saying, Chair, that as long as I can remember, as long as I've been a councillor in this chamber, this group has actively campaigned against development to the south and west and to the east of Harlow, year on year on year, and despite claims to the contrary, we were very, very disappointed that the cross-party agreement in 2012 was torn up by the Labour administration. So I end by saying, now we're in administration, we are doing the right thing by our residents, and this is why I put the motion to this chamber, Chair.
Vice Chair, can I propose an amendment, please?
Yes?
This is a really quick one. Just a point, III. It currently says will not sell or lease, and I want to remove the word will and replace it with continue to. So it reads continue to not sell or lease any land or rights of way which exists that may exist in the Furnace Sons West, mainly under levels to the south or west of Harlow. So that is the position this council has had.
And Chair, I'm happy to second that amendment.
I'd like to make an opinion made on the motion, the amendment to the motion, Chair. I would like to not accept that amendment to the motion. I'm reminded of my wedding vow, where the then good Martin Harris told me the difference between I will and I do. And he said, I will means you will, I do said maybe. And the problem with putting the word continue in there would presume that there was a previous policy in place that said that this would not happen, as I've already outlined in 2012. The cross-party agreement was ripped up. So how can we continue that was not already in train? So I would rather we stick with the word will, because we will not sell. And that is my opinion on the proposed amendment.
Sorry, so the process that we're allowed to speak to the amendment?
Yep.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Many people in this chamber will recognise that we have been having this discussion for 10 years or more. Some of us have aged quite well as a result of it, but I do remember the historical working relationship that we had and with Andrew and others over this particular issue. Ever since John Clemner came as the leader between 5 and 7 years ago, the Labour group have always made it very clear that we are not for sale. We will not sell those golden threads or those golden lines that break between us and Epping Forest. It is true developers have been to us on a number of occasions asking for us to look at things. They've talked about a bus lane, they've talked about a bike lane, they've talked about a bridle way, and consistently this council has said no way. So this idea that somehow we have made this up or changed it, we have been absolutely very clear and very, very consistent that we will not, when we were in administration, we would not sell our rights away, and if we were in authority today, that position would not change. What we are basically saying is we want to send a clear message, a consistent message from everybody from this particular chamber to Epping Forest and others and to the developers is come what you may, our position that was made 5 to 7 years ago has not changed and it has not altered, and what all this does is just reinforce exactly what we have been saying and doing for the last 5 to 7 years. So that's why I do believe having continuous is a positive, a collective and a forceful statement, and I'm disappointed that the one-word amendment is not being accepted. Thank you, Chair.
The amendment? Yeah. I've already made my opinion on the amendment, no. So happy to move to the vote on the amendment.
You haven't had anybody seconding it.
Yeah, we took half it out, we're just talking about
Sorry, Simon.
We now go to the vote on that.
on the amendment.
On the amendment. So So those in favour of the amendment?
I think it's a good idea.
Those against? The amendment is lost.
Is this the debate for the main debate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on, I've already asked, Councillor Charles was up first. I'll put you down.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. This motion is an important step by our administration to ensure that this authority listens to residents who remain concerned about the strategic housing sites included in Labour's local plan. It is important that one of the first strategic spatial policy decisions taken by our administration is to reassert a long-standing opposition to the strategic housing sites in the east, south and west. The will, in particular, of Old Harlow residents was totally ignored by the previous administration, which is why this motion calls for a special consideration to be taken into account for Churchgate Street and neighbouring areas in the ward that will be impacted by the proposed strategic housing site to the east. Any attempt to mitigate the impact to the site to the east, with a further strategic assessment to gain clarity over its feasibility, is a welcome opportunity to interrogate the original assumptions pursued by the Labour Party. I will add that my opposition, of course, does not extend to the proposed new Harlow Hospital site. This is a much needed acute care facility that will offer a great opportunity in the future to boost positive health outcomes alongside primary care provision, particularly after the last 18 months and the impact of the pandemic. This motion rightly factors in the conservation area that covers a large part of Old Harlow. It is important that the Council remains wedded to the commitment that Old Harlow's special character, its environment, its historical features are all protected as much as possible. The pledge to provide additional routes for consultation is also a much needed step, as Old Harlow residents were ignored by the previous administration, who failed to consider their legitimate concerns. Shame on them. That can never be allowed to happen again, and this administration will engage with its residents, not close the door. Safeguarding the special character of Old Harlow does not, in my view, restrict the ability of this council to develop the right infrastructure and housing density to meet the exciting promise of growth in this town, so that Harlow can become a more competitive economic centre in the east of England. This is a step forward because it enhances our ability to be responsive to community need and respect our heritage as a town. This sensitivity to the past is a bedrock of any mature vision for scaling this town's ambition to provide housing opportunities for current and future generations to enjoy.
Thank you, Chair. There's far too much development going on at the moment around Harlow. We can also see our neighbours, Bishop Stortford and so on. I don't really want to intrude on this private grief between Tory Harlow, which it is unfortunately now, and Tory Epping. But perhaps the leader of the council could actually talk to the leader of Epping Council about this. I don't know if he's had any meetings. But let's get the facts straight. It's the government that actually set down the amount of development that's actually necessary in a local plan. And in those circumstances, the government's fixation on 200,000 houses a year, all in the private sector. There's no account for public sector housing. And I would support 200,000 houses a year if at least 100,000 houses, as it used to be, are for council housing and for people to actually be able to afford rent. Let's cast our minds back as well. The whole town gathered together, both Labour and Conservative, over Gildon Way development, and I compliment the Conservatives on actually backing the Labour's opposition to Gildon Way. Meeting after meeting we had in Old Harlow to actually oppose Gildon Way. It was even opposed by the inspector when he went to an appeal. Who actually gave permission for building way development of 1,000 houses in Old Harlow? Eric Pickles, the Conservative Minister for the Environment. So once again, let's try and think about who's actually responsible for this demand for housing in the wrong places. And what we have before Parliament at the moment, I think you got the sack for it, but I don't know if it's going to be changed, but the new planning bill before Parliament at the moment means apparently you're tearing up planning regulations. We won't actually have a development control committee very soon. We will just have developers being able to build where and whenever they want. According to the latest published, they're not quite even sure if we're going to have a new hospital, which would be interesting, Chair, in the site that's mentioned. And then what does these credentials of these fine people opposite me do in regards to development? Their very first decision, Chair. What is their very first decision? Against the will of the people of Bush Fair to actually concrete over perfect green playing fields. Action is one thing, words is another. I can see what they do by action in terms of words, very worthy, I'll support the resolution, but at the end of the day, let's put the blame where blame is due, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Durkee.
Like Councillor Danvers, I welcome this motion because all it is doing is reinforcing what we have always been committed to, and all this is doing is realigning and re-establishing our commitment as a council to protect our environment over these issues. Joel is absolutely right. Churchgate Street and Harlow, Old Harlow, are wonderful, and they're a precious resource that we need to protect, and we need to build, and we need to rejuvenate, and we should never put them at risk, and we have never ever put them at risk over these particular issues. The challenge we've got is actually at the back of us with Sumners West and Latin Priory. And there are two particular issues about that. Latin Priory, which falls just behind Harlow Common, as we all know, there are a couple of gateways that the developers are desperate to get their hands on. Fortunately, we own them, and as was already said by Joel and others, and Russell, is that we are absolutely deeply committed that those gates will remain closed for as long as we possibly can, and that's why we welcome this motion. We do have a problem, however, in Sumners, because even though we have got the roundabout that goes nowhere behind the Herald and upwards, and that is the golden thread, and again we've made it very clear we won't sell that, and even though we've got the land down at the Water Lane roundabout where the horses are, and that's where one of the developers wants to bring in a new road, and we've made it abundantly clear we're not selling that. The weakness in our defence is where the school is, because the school's land is not owned by Harlow Council. It is actually owned by Essex County Council and is managed by a private education consortium. All the county councillors in this room should also make an absolute declaration, because we do know that the developers will and have been to Essex County Council in the past and said, we will build you a brand new school, we will relocate your brand new school, but for that we want your land. And the very essence of why they want that land is because that is the road that they can build directly from Epping Forest through our old school, which will be built somewhere wonderful, etc., but facing away from Harlow, and it will immediately go onto Essex County Council roads. So I hope we can all unite and we can send an absolutely clear message, both to Epping Forest but also to Essex County Council, that in no way, no shape or no form you can invest in that school, but you cannot sell that school. And if we can lock that down, I think we've actually got something that the developers can't touch, can't come out, not unless the government changes the rules and regulations, which is a possibility, but the bottom line is we are united as one, that we are opposed to selling, leasing, lending, whatever you want to call it, any of those golden gateways that would allow access into our town. It's not reasonable, it's not fair, it's not right, and we will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to apologise for repeating some of the statements my fellow councillors have already said, but I'd already prepared my speech for the light. Chairman, members, I stand before you tonight in support of this motion and add my concern to those residents who would be affected by these developments proposed to the main by Epping Forest District Council and to be included in the new local plan which is currently in discussion. These developments are proposed to abut our southern boundary at Sumner West, Catherine's East, Bland Priory and the strategic housing sites to the east of Harlow, Churchgate Street. My fellow councillors have spoken about Sumner West, Catherine's East and Bland Priory, Roses, so I will not repeat our strong opposition to develop in these areas. I want to deal mainly with the proposed strategic housing site at east of Harlow, Churchgate Street. This proposed development is included in both Epping Forest District Council's currently unadopted plan and our own Harlow District Council's new local development plan, which was adopted in December 2020. Harlow's adopted local development plan includes many sites, but more importantly, due to its size and location, under HS3 of that plan, the strategic housing site east of Harlow. We all know this area is Churchgate Street and its neighbouring parts of Old Harlow. Churchgate Street is in a conservation area and therefore should be and must be treated with special consideration when it comes to any housing development and associated infrastructure. Churchgate Street already suffers from rat running through the village, and any development will, without doubt, cause this to become a major problem for the residents. I've lived in Old Harlow for over 30 years, and it's a very special place to the local residents and my fellow councillors and myself. Over the last few years, Old Harlow has seen a large number of dwellings built around this area, namely Church Langley, New Hall, and more recently the Guild Park development, which is currently under construction and will result in a further 1,100 dwellings. Apart from the housing developments, we have also had to deal with the new Junction 7A and the link road that runs through the middle of Old Harlow along Gildon Way. This was a country road until the current widening programme. My fellow councillors and I campaigned against both Gildon Park developments due to its location and more importantly its size and use of Gildon Way and the use of Gildon Way to Junction 7A. Both of these were, in my opinion, very bad decisions. However, we now have to live with these decisions and try to mitigate their impact on the local residents. We are now being told we have to accommodate a further 2,600 dwellings on green fields and farmland adjoining Churchgate Street. Unfortunately, most of the proposed site is in the Epping Forest area, and once again we're expected to accept development on our borders with no perceived benefit to our town. These developments will destroy what green areas we have left in Harlow in the race to build more houses with little or no concept of what they're doing to our children's future. The new hospital is one development in this area that I fully support and is desperately needed for Harlow. The downside for Old Harlow will be an increase in traffic along Gildon Way to go with the new junction. Any developer for the strategic housing site east of Harlow must produce a strategic master plan. We as local councillors, and most importantly the local residents, must be involved and consulted when this master plan is in the process of being drawn up. The developers must also produce a heritage impact assessment to inform that all heritage assets are protected. I believe the council should also revisit and reassess the strategic housing assessment that was used in drawing up our adopted local plan in an effort to understand why so many dwellings needed to be built. During this period when our local plan was being drawn up, the strategic assessment housing needs were reduced by the government, but the former administration, in their perceived wisdom, decided to ignore this and continue with their programme of overdevelopment. Stuck together. There is no current road infrastructure for the area, which is therefore in effect landlocked to some extent. The new administration has pledged to review this site as a matter of urgency, not only because of the the drop in the number of dwellings required under the strategic housing assessment that we are required to build, but to continue with the planned number of dwellings on this site would be, I submit, overdevelopment and would blight the lives of all residents who live close by and should be built and live. I've nearly finished, James. Okay, sorry. Just to confirm, my fellow councillors and intended to take up a lead. Just to confirm, I can whistle a bit here somewhere, and we intend to take a leading role even when any master plan is drawn up. We cannot lose any more of Harlow's green and pleasant lanes. So Freddie Gibbard had a master plan for Harlow, but alas, his vision has been abandoned, with all green areas coming under threat. Your new Conservative administration will promise to continue to oppose any further erosion of our green spaces, both to the south of the town and to the east. I have no hesitation in supporting this motion tonight in an effort to protect our residents and the town from overdevelopment. Thank you.
I must admit I was naive on many of these matters, so I've done a little bit of research, but I just want to respond mainly to a few points that have been made. And I'm pleased that it's cross-party agreement on the motion. I was just surprised that the previous Labour administration didn't pass such a motion, and in fact tore up the cross-party agreement in 2012. But nevertheless, one thing that I think has been a striking omission, perhaps, from both Councillor Danvers and Councillor Durkin's contributions so far, is the mention of their local plan. They haven't spoken about their local plan, which included these sites, but you know what they did do? They all voted for it. So they can come here tonight and talk about their opposition to this plan, but they voted for these houses to go into these places. They voted for this overdevelopment. So Councillor Danvers talks about words and actions. Well, my goodness, you could not get a starker contrast of words and actions. Councillor Danvers also mentioned council housing and the need to build it. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more that we need to build a vast amount of council housing in the right places. I also agree. I opposed the perfect green site as a Bush Fair councillor being used for development. But there was another site in Bush Fair, a green site, that was a green wedge, that was, well, a green area, not designated green wedge, but nevertheless, never used as a lot, Mr. Tony. I know you're a stickler for detail. So, Councillor Danvers, spoke his opposition to using green land to build council housing. I mentioned Bushy Croft. I was just checking who signed off the budget for Bushy Croft development. Who proposed the budget for the Bushy Croft development? You guessed it, folks. Councillor Danvers proposed the budget for this building on this site, which I'm pleased to inform is progressing well. But nevertheless, I still oppose it. New hospital is mentioned. If you're going to use private eye as your source for information on such matters, crikey, that retirement will be etching forward. Private eye is not a source of information as to whether we're getting a new hospital. We're getting a new hospital because the Conservative government did something that Labour government never did in 13 years, invested in Harlow. So I must say this is a very good motion. I will back it wholeheartedly. And yet again, all we have is cheap words and hypocrisy, talking about rewriting history. There's only one party here that rewrites history, and they sit over there.
Thank you, Chair. In supporting the motion, I actually agree with a lot of what's been said on both sides and disagree with a lot of what's been said, particularly from the opposite side. Councillor Durkin's already eloquently told us tonight a lot of this stuff here is not new to us. It's something that we've already put in place many, many years ago. Speaking as a Harlow Common councillor, myself and Councillor Holcomb, and before that Councillor Tull, have always raised concerns about the Latin Priory estate. We've always raised concerns about what Councillor Durkin said about the gateway. Myself and Councillor Holcomb have attended many Harlow Common Residents Forum meetings, but this is quite a thorny subject, and we've always raised our concerns. And just to be history, which does not come from private rights, a bit of proper history, is many years ago, I think it was Councillor Andrew Johnson brought several motions along this subject to this very chamber. Our then leader, Councillor John Petner, gave this group a free vote. Both myself, and it's probably archived somewhere on video, both myself and Councillor Holton voted with the Conservative group about our concerns and stopping development that inquiry south and east of Harlow. So this is not someone coming through with their white charger tonight, this is all brand new, and you've always been opposed to it. That is not a fact. The facts are we've consistently, myself and Councillor Holton, raised concerns, particularly around that inquiry, and consistently have always voiced our opinions on that. We have problems to face, and I think we should all be level-headed and adult about those problems. A lot of this land has been said previously by the opposition is in Epping Council. They are holding a great deal of weight in this argument. We can, as Councillor Durkin said, we can shut the gateways off to them, we can make it really difficult for them. All this land that we're talking about is actually in Epping Council land, and that is a real obstacle for us. Another big obstacle for us, which I think has rightly been raised tonight, we can object to all these proposals, we can say no, you're not getting them. What happened to Gordon Way? The Conservative minister then held the appeal and granted them permission to put that all over Old Harlow. So while we're being the champions of Old Harlow, and to I've got nothing wrong with Old Harlow at all, but that's the place. But we've got to remember the big hiccup there came when Eric Pickles decided to overturn this council. It was voted for against Gordon Way in this chamber, and a Conservative minister overturned that decision and put that on Old Harlow. Not no one here. Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Harlow, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. No, I apologise, I'm going to repeat some things that other people have said. Harlow is going to grow in the coming 30 years, as we discussed actually this time last week when talking about the town plan. It has to be sustainable growth in the right place and with the appropriate infrastructure delivered in a timely way, namely when the homes come forward. This group has opposed development south and west of Harlow for many years, long before I was a councillor, preferring instead growth to the north of the town. The previous administration agreed with us, but then did a spectacular U-turn in 2017 and withdrew the objection to the Epping Forest local plan, in effect supporting development south and west of the town, but with no guarantees on either soft or hard infrastructure being in place. This allowed the Epping Forest local plan to progress until today. We are in the final stages of the process, with the main modifications going through public consultation ahead of the plan probably being approved and then, by the inspector, and then being adopted by Epping Forest Council. We have perhaps come to power too late in the local plan process. The inspector may see our contribution as such, the principle of development having been examined previously. Who knows? We will have to wait and see. But listening to the opposition tonight, anyone would think that they are opposed to development to the south and the west of Harlow. But the fact is, in 2017, you reversed your objection. If you hadn't reversed your objection, I am sure that the inspector would have changed the plan or found it unsound, and we wouldn't be where we are today. But the fact is, you reversed your objection. And that's the key thing. You reversed your objection. This motion coming before you reiterates our long-held belief that development should be to the north, not to the south and the west. The position is actually supported by Sir Freddie Gibbard himself, who talks about growth to the north and closing the circle. But whatever development comes around Harlow, there are several elements that have to happen. The first is there must be proper consultation with Harlow residents. This has been missing, both with the Epping local plan, who have no obligation to talk to our residents, and in our own local plan, where you did have an obligation, but you did the barest minimum you could to get away with it. The infrastructure has to be in place as the first homes come forward, especially transport and these sustainable transport corridors.
The new development, and this is quite important, has to be properly integrated with the existing town, so the new residents feel part of the community and the existing residents don't feel alienated. And finally, proper steps to mitigate the development for the town has to be in place, such as Section 106, nomination rights, and so on. So I will be supporting this motion going forward.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very important to put on record that this administration does what it says it's going to do, and that's exactly what this motion does tonight, Chair. I think you need to wait, Tony, and look at the budget proposals next year, and alternatively you could follow what the Chair has asked us to do and not talk over other members as you continue to do. I'm certainly committed to doing what I promised in election leaflets, and one of those things was fighting against the development to the south and west of the town, and that's why I'm pleased to see Councillor Perry bring this motion tonight. It's not a motion that is new or novel. It's a motion that goes back over 20 years to when the thought process around the Epping development started. Councillor Churchill originally brought a motion to this chamber that was accepted cross-party to fight against development to the south and west. But times do move on, and one of the advantages of having been here for a very long time is that I'm a sad geek and I keep records of everything that's gone on. And in 2012, as has already been mentioned, the Labour Party tore up the joint consensus that we had and decided to plough ahead with agreeing with Epping development. And it didn't stop there. In 2015, 5 years ago almost to the day, at the end of August in 2015, 6 years ago. Councillor Wilkinson's right, there was a motion that came before this council, and it was to do with the strategic housing, the SHMAR, the strategic housing numbers. But within that, the Labour Council moved to consider that it supported the spatial options of strategic sites to the south and west of Harlow. And there was a very big debate, and it's funny, it must have been a tough election in Harlow Common, because to their credit, Councillors Wilkinson and Toll did jump up and agree with us when we were objecting to it, and it did force the Labour Party's hand. And from memory, we had an amendment during the meeting, and the Labour Party came back with a motion that was acceptable to their members, which was Harlow Council has reservations, but will consider such options once transportation has been dealt with and things like that. As a sock to their members for their election leaflets. We voted against that, but the Labour Party voted it through. Then we come to December 2016, the following year. And at that point we were debating Harlow's local plan and the interconnectivity of these different plans and growth around Harlow. And Councillor Charles and myself moved a motion to reopen the Section 18 consultation of our local plan to enable residents around Harlow to have their say about the sites in and around Harlow. And guess what? It was voted down by the administration. And then in 2017, as Councillor Hardware has reinforced, the Labour Party have actively pursued agreement with the Epping Forest local plan. I'm quite happy to tell Councillor Danvers that I've told Chris Whitbread and the leading members of Epping Forest District Council on many occasions that I don't agree with their local plan. I don't agree with the growth to the south and west of Harlow. I said when I took the leadership of this council this time, I would not be afraid to tell other Conservative councils and other Conservative members up and down the country that I will do the best for Harlow. And that's what I'll do by voting for this motion tonight, the best for Harlow. However, I'm not going to say that a Conservative gets everything right. Clearly, councils and governments don't get everything right. I've already had conversations with the previous Minister about the future of planning and about the future of local plans. I'm quite prepared and will be wanting to seek every opportunity to have a conversation with the new Minister, again to bat for Harlow's corner, to make sure that in future people have a say on the growth that's going to be imposed around them. I do not believe that growth to the south and west of Harlow is correct. For 22, 23 years in this chamber, I have fought against growth to the south and west. I think it's abhorrent for the Labour Party to now say, oh yes, we disagree, after spending 9 years of previous administration signing up to it, agreeing it, voting down motions against it. It's two-faced, and I think the public will see through that. But the one thing, Chair, I want to say is, I made an election commitment that I would vote against and push against development to the south and west. And I'm going to honour that commitment to residents tonight by voting for this motion.
Councillor Edwards.
Very briefly, Chair. Firstly, Just very briefly then, Chair. Firstly, let us be clear, it's central government, I believe, that sort of set the housing target and set the house. There's a no over there. The central government which is imposed upon the district authorities, as far as I'm aware, targets for their particular area. It was also central government, I believe, in 2011, I think it was, that set up the Localism Act and set upon local authorities the duty to cooperate, and in particular to cooperate over planning processes and to evidence that they're cooperating. So in terms of as I understand it, in terms of the history of the previous administration and the history of the Labour administration, there was also very, very good arguments being put forward for the growth of the town in terms of the economic growth of the town and what that could bring, both in terms of the regeneration, in terms of the town centre, the regeneration, in terms of jobs and regeneration in terms of the town. Now, all of those things, it would seem to me, has meant that as far as this Labour administration is concerned, yes, we've looked at that. We've then looked at what we can do to mitigate, to cooperating on the one hand, but also to mitigate against the worst effects on the other hand. So if you look in terms of the growth that's planned down there, no, we can't control what's necessarily going on in Epping. What we can do, and what we have done, is said, no, you're not going to have access to this, or you're not going to have access to that. We'll cooperate with you where we can cooperate with you, and we've been equally clear where we can't cooperate with you. In terms of going forward, I get slightly concerned about when we talk about, we're all in favour of the growth in the north. The growth in the north, and I would have moved an amendment tonight with regard to the growth in the north, in particular with regard to the Stork Crossing, but I'm told that as that is just give me 2 minutes or 8 minutes, I'll be grateful. As that is a live planning application, I can't move it. But on the other hand, what I would say is we need to be very, very careful when looking, because the devil is always within the detail. We need to be very careful when we move from outline planning to live applications, and because whilst it's in outline planning, we collectively have the means to very much influence the way that growth is going to take place.
Can you turn your mic on?
No, I'm not going to speak, so I'm just going to suggest we put the question forward. As it seems that there's an agreement, can we just have the question asked?
Councillor, I've got to go to Councillor Perrin.
Yes. Councillor Perrin.
Thank you very much. An interesting debate, nonetheless. It's not what's said, but sometimes between the lines. We've heard a lot tonight. We've heard a lot of what we would have done, what we wouldn't have done. The one thing that always strikes me about the Labour Party locally is they're very good at saying where the problem is with everyone else, but they're never very good at looking at the problems they have created themselves. I'm really afraid that they can't see past the beam in their own eye. We've heard from Councillor Johnson the long, long list of contradictory motions that they have put while they were in administration. In fact, I'm reminded by Councillor Churchill, who has equally been as vocal on development to South West against that in 2013 the then Labour administration took up options to be able to sell land to South and West Harlow to allow Sumners West to begin. And they were pilloried at the West Sumners Residents Association, of which I had the delight of sitting there and watching many of the Labour councillors opposite me bluster their way through and basically say that they weren't going to not sell, that they were going to sell, but they weren't not going to sell. It was very, very confusing, but nonetheless, it was amusing to watch, and I'm glad to have been reminded of it once again. They didn't oppose Epping Forest District Council's local plan. They didn't vote against the current Harlow local plan. We've heard tonight from the strategic portfolio holder for growth that they moved a Regulation 19 order, which meant they went on the process. They didn't consult Regulation 18, which Councillor Johnson has said, which would have allowed people to actually see what these sites would go into. They were dead set against that.
And so, in the round, you know, I'm welcoming the Damascus-like conversion yet again. And, you know, we all know about the ebbs and flows of political fortune, and, you know, one day they may well win again. And then we'll be in the position of watching them tear up possibly a cross-party agreement they're about to sign up to, and then we can watch them deny it all over again. But for now, that isn't the case. We are here, we are where we are, we are honouring our election commitment and our long-held campaign to oppose developments in South West Ireland. And we've heard much mention about planning committees and who's going this way. Remember, planning committees, and I didn't educate many people on the other side of the chamber, but sometimes I feel I must. You know, I'd like a day off from being a teacher one day, but they just won't let me have it. Which is, that it's a quasi-judicial committee. In other words, it has no strategic oversight. They have to go with the material planning laws that are in front of them. And if your local plan prevents them from making an opposing decision to one they want, it lays us open to appeal, which would cost this authority money. But then again, they don't really care about it because they love burning the cash, don't they? So even way you box it, they can't handle it. So I'm really glad you're going to support this. I'm really glad that. Really glad you didn't go on any further, Councillor Edwards, with your so-called motion of amendment, because that would have been a bit dodgy, and I think many people realise that, which meant your leader couldn't say any furthermore. And I'm really glad that we've had this debate and that we're able to show that we are honouring our election commitment to the people of south and west of Harlow, and that we are going to do everything we can to mitigate impact to the east of Harlow, which is only the right and proper thing to do. Thank you, Chair.
We now go to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Item 9, reference from Cabinet and committees, is about the DFT standards. Can I have a proposal, please? Thank you, Councillor Church. Can I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Is that agreed? Right. Item 10A, the independent member of the Audit and Standards Committee. Can I have a proposal? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Clark. Is that agreed? Agreed. Item 11, minutes of the Cabinet and Committee meetings. There are no matters of urgent business, so the council meeting now at 8:35. If you'd like to join me in 10 minutes in the breakout room, there is some alcohol refreshments. Councillor Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, is there not a form that we can sign our names to say that we were here going around and what's going to stop that?
Is there a form?
Because I don't want to be accused of being Thank you. Rob Cameron.